This year, we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Ecological Footprint and Biocapacity accounting system. This important concept has revolutionized the way we understand the impact of human activities on our planet. To mark this occasion, we are releasing a series of 3 videos, each exploring a different stage of the footprint. This video is part of that series and focuses on the past of the ecological footprint. In the video, we ask our guests to share their stories of how they became involved with the concept and when they first realized it was significant. We hope that these conversations will provide valuable insights into the history of the footprint and its evolution over the past 3 decades. Reflecting on when I was first introduced to the ecological footprint and biocapacity accounting system is interesting because I was first introduced to it, like many people, in high school when it was assigned to me as an assignment to go and calculate how many Earths it would require if everyone lived like me. And that class really sparked my passion for environmental studies. And so I find it very full circle now that I find myself working for the Ecological Footprint Initiative at York University. And while I was initially brought on to do some very specific work, I quickly saw that pairing such a clear and concise indicator with social science research was really powerful and perhaps an underdeveloped area of footprint research and literature. So I became intellectually invested. I saw the power that it had as an indicator. And so now I want to share both the passion that it sparked in me in my environmental studies class in high school, and also the effective amount of change it can create as a powerful indicator and holistic indicator.
We were funded by a fellow called Jack Santa Barbara to run a 2-day workshop on the ecological footprint at York University. And at that event, we pulled together a lot of key people. Matters was there, Ed Henner was there, some of the critics of the footprint was there, a fellow that I've come to know quite well over the years, Jerome Vandenberg, a very bright economist in Europe, who was not very well disposed towards the footprint. Other people from Statistics Canada were there, a very good group of people. I worked closely with one of my students, Ed Crummy, who's gone on to work in the provincial government. We conducted the workshop. I was the co-chair with Karen Craft Sloan. I think she was either still in politics or had shortly left her position as a politician. It was a very enlightening workshop, I think, for me and for others. We got to grips with the rationale for the footprint, the methodological shortcomings, problems with data. There was also some lack of understanding. Well, I shared that. But we came out of it with recommendations for Statistics Canada. As I say, we're at the workshop. We gave them sort of different levels of involvement. One was just some sort of cooperation with the Global Footprint Network, all the way up to seeing what could be done to get the Canadian government to adopt it as a formal metric that they would report on annually.
I began to teach this as something I called at the time the regional capsule concept. In the little book Matisse Wackernagel and I did, you can see a graphic where we have the city of Vancouver, any city, enclosed in a big glass capsule. And the question I would ask my students is, the urban geographers kept arguing with me that, look, urbanization is wonderful. Cities only occupy like 2 or 3% of the world's surface. So what's the problem with urbanization? And I said, well, all right, let's take your city with its 2 to 3% of the Earth's productive surface. What would happen to that city if it were enclosed in a large, impermeable glass bell jar, the regional capsule, as I called it? And they quickly understood that that city would quickly starve to death and suffocate at the same time. It would starve and dry up because all of the resources consumed by the populations of typical cities are produced elsewhere on Earth. They're the quintessential node of consumption in the human fabric, the human ecosystem, and the productive areas are always external to the cities. And they would also suffocate because cities are dissipative structures. They import all of these low entropy resources, convert them to something useful, but also produce an equivalent quantity of waste, which accumulates obviously within the glass bell jar. We have a situation where cities, in effect, the way we've constructed them, and under the dynamic of perpetual growth, the urban population of Earth has become parasitic on the global landscape because the growth of urban areas is being financed at the expense of the depletion of the natural capital assets, the forests, the fisheries, the soils, and so on. that sustained them. All of this came together, and I realized that, this idea might really go somewhere. So I began writing it up using the term regional capsule. This would be around 1990. This was the first and only time that the department actually bought a number of new computers. And it was a tower model. And I was one of the first in the department to get my new computer. So a colleague came in, Craig Davis, and said, "Oh, gee, you got your new computer. How do you like it?" I said, "Well, no different from the old computer in terms of how it works. But by gosh, I love it. It has a much smaller footprint on my desk." And another light went off. I replaced every reference to the urban capsule with the concept of urban ecological footprint. And of course, it was a stroke of wonderment for me to get such a wonderful student on board. And of course, he's become one of the prime champions and went on to found the Global Footprint Network. That was just a terrific advance of the nature of the footprint and getting it out there. I mean, I was an academic. I loved the idea, but he went on to quantify it and to bring it into the world in ways that I had just simply not even thought about doing. So that's the early story of the ecological footprint. It goes back right to my farm boy days. It was stimulated, I suppose, most by the challenge of an economist who said ecology in human terms is, at least human ecology, is almost irrelevant because of the genius of humankind in substituting for nature and because of trade. Certainly concepts like carrying capacity have no relevance to the human condition. I set about to refute that notion, came up with the basic idea, and we put it in motion through the eco footprint.
I was first directly introduced to it in grad school during sort of the period of intellectual exploration. So my research lab was called the Systems Ecology Lab. So naturally, systems thinking is a strong component of our work. I personally was studying structure and function of natural ecosystems. So I was quite familiar with ecosystems focusing on carbon flows and net primary production as primary elements of ecosystem function. And I think I first got on the topic looking at articles on hemp, so human appropriation of net primary productivity, which is a very similar concept. And I always kind of wanted to understand more about the relationship between sort of humanity and nature. So I guess when I came upon the ecological footprint concept, it naturally just really resonated with the systems kind of background and thinking and my ecology background. And from that angle, I really found the concept quite significant, especially since it allowed you to ask a simple and very fundamental question related to sustainability and give a very simple answer.
So in my high school geography class, we actually calculated our individual footprints using Global Footprint Network's online calculator. And, that's what really started to generate some thinking for me about our human impact on the planet, as well as what we can do to help. And it also inspired me to learn more about ecological footprint. So that was sort of the beginnings of my inspiration for wanting to work on the footprint and make a change myself. So after I began working for the Ecological Footprint Initiative, I started to engage with the footprint through a communications context, and this was done because I was the communications and marketing assistant, and I still am. So I had to teach myself about the footprint using various online sources. This required a lot of research, especially due to the fact that I was supposed to transform that research into communications and marketing materials. So this was done through social media posts. This really opened my eyes to the different ways that the footprints can be used and the different applications of the footprint to the real world. And these include policy making, advocacy, activism, as well as in a legal context, which I'm working on a project right now related to the footprint and the law, and just overall environmental change. So yeah, that's how I began engaging with the footprint.
First introduced to the ecological footprint at a community workshop about it that was led by Bill Reese, who was in Hamilton when I was an economics student, learning economics at McMaster University. And it was a community forum organized by Environment Hamilton. And there was Bill Reese introducing the concept of ecological footprint, and that's prompted us in this workshop to have little breakout groups about thinking of ways to enact change to reduce our ecological footprint. Although From what I remember at the time, there wasn't a lot of measurement associated with it because obviously it was quite new, and there wasn't wasn't the accounting system that exists nowadays for it. It was mostly the concept with a few ideas about how significant some of the components are. But still, like, the concept was captivating enough that it really excited the audience, and it stayed with me. Although then I didn't hear much about it after that. Obviously, I was an economics student. So it was not until many years later that I came across the ecological footprint again when I went into ecological economics.